welcome to my channel. My name is Joanna. If you are new to this channel, welcome. I hope you stay. I will briefly state my intention. My intention is to bring forward higher vibrational information with the intention of helping you understand yourself on a much deeper level, beyond what or how you currently understand yourself. The reason for that, quite simple. The more you understand yourself, the more you see who you are underneath your unconscious conditioning, the more you embody your true power. So essentially, my greatest passion is to help you and myself become more empowered. And I do this as a way to bring truth to the world. I don't know if I want to say that. I'll make it simpler. My passion, my intention is to help you be more empowered, to help you more be in tune with who you truly are beyond your conscious or unconscious conditioning. And if you are listening to this, if you are looking at this type of information, then there is a part of you that is wanting to set itself free from whatever inner prison you are in. And as a human being, we're all in our own human prisons or inner prisons, which is the prison of the mind. So I hope you find this information helpful. If you do, I would love for you to subscribe, to click the notification button. It lets you know when I upload new material, new content, and if you would like to share it with a friend or two who you feel would benefit from this information, I would be forever grateful. And of course, I hope you continue to stay. For those of you who are returning, thank you so much for coming back. I will forever be grateful to you. If there was no use out there listening to this, I wouldn't be doing this. And I absolutely love doing this. It always brings me back to the energy of home. And when I say home, most of you know what I'm referring to. Home is the place, although it's not a place, but for lack of a better word, home is the space, the consciousness we come from, which is a very high vibrational consciousness. Its highest expression is unconditional love. And if you're listening to this type of material, you probably already know that. And it's the type of frequency that most humans, including myself, are not embodying most of the time. And if you've ever felt that kind of energy, that kind of frequency, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I had the pleasure of feeling tiny percentage of that frequency. And I've talked about this before, and it was something out of this freaking world. And I will never forget it because I feel it permanently changed my cellular structure. It was so profound that it is absolutely impossible to put into words. So those of you who have experienced this, even on a small level, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So today's video is going to be a little bit different. I don't normally focus on predictions. That's generally not what I do. My passion is to help people see themselves for who they truly are, not who they think or believe they are. So it's basically to help people become more empowered and to move beyond their conditioning or their limitations. But because we are at the end of 2021 and we are now almost at year 2022, I said to my guidance, you know, what is this next year going to be all about? Give me some idea, because I'm curious, I'm interested, it fascinates me. So I'm always going to talk from the perspective of awareness, higher awareness. I'm not going to get into politics. That's not what I do. I'm not interested in that. So just bear that in mind. But I did see some interesting things that I will share with you. So as the title suggests, who controls your mind? That which controls your mind controls you. Is pretty much indicative of what we might be seeing or experiencing in 2022 and beyond. What does that mean, really? Well, most of our life happens unconsciously. And when I say happens unconsciously, because we are unconscious most of the time, or we are, in other words, not consciously creating our life, life happens to us. If we're not conscious of creating our life, then life happens unconsciously. And over the next few years, it's being suggested that humanity as a whole is beginning to wake up. And I feel it is already happening. Certainly, I work with people all day long who are beginning the process of awakening. But over the next, going forward, we're going to see awakening happening on a massive scale. What does that mean? What does that really mean, to be awakened? It simply means that we are going to, or are becoming aware of who we really truly are beyond our conditioning, beyond our limitations, beyond our beliefs, beyond our ego. What is an ego, really? Ego is how we identify ourselves. We identify ourselves based on where we are born, based on our experiences, based on what we believe, based on what we think. But that's just the shell. That's just the shell. Underneath what you call yourself, or how we identify ourselves, there is this true essence of who we really are, which is, in its purity, essentially the highest expression of unconditional love. But to have a human experience, and to have a very genuine human experience, we agree to, on a soul level, to come into a human body, or to experience a human body. And in order to do that effectively, we have to have what we refer to as collective amnesia, which means we essentially need to forget who we are, because it would make no sense to have a human experience in a very limited form, but have an awareness that we are unlimited. And although some of us have some of that awareness, we cannot fully have full awareness, because if we did, and because it is all frequency, our bodies would blow up essentially. So, but the point I'm trying to make here is that humanity at large is going to, and is beginning to, wake up to the fact that we are more than just physical humans. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you already know that on some level. So if this is new to you, you are going to be drawn to more information like this, and sometimes you will be scratching your head. And but for those of you who are already on this path, this is going to become much more in depth. We are going to, of course not everybody, but those who are choosing to become more awake, more aware, we're going to be looking at ourselves and recognizing aspects of ourselves that were previously not conscious to our awareness, and thereby becoming aware of not only who we truly are beyond our current awareness and beyond our limitations, but more importantly, the more we become aware of those things, of those aspects of ourselves, the more we truly become in control of ourselves. So the whole idea, who controls your mind controls you. If we are not aware of what controls us, and I'm not getting political here, this is purely about individual life. if we're not aware of how we limit ourselves, because it is mostly unconsciously driven, then basically we are being controlled by what is unconscious. And if it's unconscious to us, we can't really do anything about it. So we become almost like, I dare to say, puppets. And oftentimes we become our own worst enemies. Now, by far more than anything, what controls us is fear. We live in a society that is, in human form, that is, very much driven by survival. But there is more to life than just surviving. Of course, in order for anything to happen, we have to survive. But there is more to life than just survival. And many of us, as humanity at large, is unconsciously, of course, survival driven. And in order for us to have that drive, there has to be some level of fear. In other words, if we did not fear losing life at all, if we didn't have that mechanism, then we would probably most likely do stupid things, and we probably wouldn't be on this planet for very long. And that probably wouldn't be very productive if you're trying to be to have a human experience in order to grow from and to expand. So fear and fear of in itself is not a bad thing. It's designed to have a purpose, and it has its purpose. But just like anything, too much of anything is not very good. Too little of anything is not very good. So it's about becoming more into a space of balance. Now, in order to balance things out, we have to first understand what is out of balance. And for most of us, or many of us, we consciously don't know what that is. So the year 22 was symbolically shown to me as the phoenix rising from its ashes. Now, most of you understand what this symbology means. It basically means rebirth. It means awakening. It means coming to life again. But in order to be reborn, and this is obviously a metaphor, in order to be born again, something has to die. So essentially what I'm saying is that the year 2022 and beyond is a year of rising up from the ashes, which essentially means in order for us to rise up from our ashes, we first have to burn. And I'm not saying this to be dramatic or drastic, dramatic, but all you have to do is just look at the world, what's happening, and there is a lot of crushing and burning happening right now. And there's a good reason for it. Essentially, what is no longer serving us as humanity has to come to a place or a space where it has to crash and burn in order for new to come to rise. So that's collectively, and collectively means it's made up of every single one of us. So each and every one of us will be on some level facing our own crash and burn in order to rise up again in a new way, in a new shape, in a new form. But what does that really mean? Well, for one, what I was seeing is that many of us will be liberating from ourselves. There's going to be a lot of liberation happening. What is liberation? Liberation is to free. I actually looked up the metaphor, not the metaphor, the meaning. A liberation is the act of setting someone free from imprisonment, slavery, or oppression. Release. So pretty self-explanatory. And we will be seeing that on a global scale, but again, the reason why this will be happening on a global scale is because it will be the result of us liberating ourselves from ourselves. What does that mean? It means that for those of us who choose, of course, there's always a choice, we are going to be choosing to no longer limit ourselves based on fear. And I'm going to share a story with you. About 6 years ago, I was in an altered state, and I had a very profound vision that was one of those moments that I will never forget. It again etched itself on my soul. But in this state, I saw a dragon, this huge dragon. And there was something peculiar about this dragon. He was trying to fly, but he couldn't. And when I looked at him, trying to understand, he was in so much pain. He was in his dragon way, screaming, crying, yelping for help. He was in agony, and I couldn't understand why. And all of a sudden, I looked at his foot, and to his foot was a string. There was a string tied to his foot, and it was like, okay, that was a little bit peculiar to me. And I followed this string, and this string was being held by a little tiny human. And I thought to myself, that's odd. This ginormous dragon is in agony. It can't fly because he's tied to this tiny little string, to this tiny little human. That made no sense to me. So I asked the question, what is this trying to say to me? And here's what my answer was. The string represents an attachment to other people's expectations. And when I saw that, when I heard that, it's like someone put a knife in my heart. I knew what it meant. This dragon was representing me. And this dragon couldn't fly. It couldn't be what it was meant to be. It couldn't be free. It couldn't fly because he was tied to other people's expectations of him. And the dragon was representing me. In that moment, when I became conscious just how much that controls me, I began to weep and cry like a baby. And for the first time in my life, I consciously became aware just how much I am being held back, or I hold myself back because of other people's expectations of me. And I couldn't be free. And that was the moment when I began to wake up, when I truly began to wake up. Because all the dragon had to do was pull his foot and the person would fly. There would not even be any string with that kind of power. Yet it wasn't happening. So when I talk about releasing ourselves from our inner prisons, this is the type of thing I'm talking about. And for most of my life up until that point, I was not consciously aware of that. It was part of me. It was affecting me every single day of my life, but I wasn't conscious of it, which means I was prisoner to it. I was imprisoned, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it. And it was an imprisonment of my own making at that point. All I had to do was just become conscious of it. So I'm sharing this story with you, which is very personal. I've never talked about this before. I actually don't even, probably 2 or 3 of my closest friends know about it, but that's about it. Because it's one of those things that you don't share with people, because it's, well, unless you actually have experienced something like this, it kind of loses its meaning when you tell somebody. Just you can't quite convey the message. But these are the sort of experiences that I believe are going to be transpiring for those of us who are choosing to free ourselves from our own imprisonment over the next several years going forward. Now, you have your own strings that you are attached to. You have your own attachments that you are unaware of, and these attachments are not allowing you to be free. And there is one thing that is in common with all these attachments. It's fear. For me, it was the fear of not belonging. It was the fear of being abandoned. It was the fear of not being good enough, which is why I do what I do, to help people let go of that attachments, of those fears. That is what I am passionate about the most. And the only way I can truly and fully be able to help you is by first understanding on my own skin what it means and how to free my own self from it. And it is a lifelong journey, as I'm sure you guys know. Nonetheless, it is something that I am here to do on this earth, to facilitate this awareness in others, so that you can be free, so that you can fly. I was guided to use a certain deck that I haven't used for a while, and it's the spirit animal deck, and there were 3 cards, 3 animals. Incidentally, they're all birds that were shown to me as symbols for what's coming up for 2022. First one being the hawk. So the hawk is a messenger. So in spiritual terms, the hawk represents a messenger. It's a divine messenger. This symbol represents the mind. The hawk obviously soars high, and it has extremely keen sense of sight. So this symbol represents that many of us are going to choose to see things much more clearly, which will allow us to soar higher. When we soar higher, we can see things from a much different perspective. Now, if you really think about it, everything is all about perspective. You can look at one thing close up and see it one way, and then you can look at the same thing from far out and see something very different. Not because the thing you're looking at has changed, but because your perspective has changed. So many of us are choosing to have different perspectives on how we see ourselves, and therefore how we see life in general. And one of the side effects, if you will, of shifting our perspective is the process of identity change. When we shift how we see ourselves, we essentially shift how we identify with ourselves. And for many, that represents what is called ego death. And if you've ever gone through this process, and I have on several occasions, it is not a particularly comfortable process. And that's because at some point, your understanding of yourself becomes very blurred. You essentially become confused, and you become unsure of who you are. And that is very uncomfortable. But I will tell you this, though the process is uncomfortable, to put it mildly, and the side effects of that process is clearing of the old so the new can come in. The end result is something that is very hard to put into words. In other words, I want to say in many cases is beyond expectations. Because remember, our expectations are tied to how we see things, which is tied to our experiences. So in order to have new experiences, we have to shed a certain layer of our understanding of ourselves. And that's called the process of ego death. Okay? And the process of the ego dying, and let me just back up for a second. You will always have a way of identifying yourself. What I'm talking about is you shift the way you identify yourself so that you release yourself from your own internal prison. So you will still identify yourself, but in a way that helps you feel free versus making you feel limited. Now, we're all going to have some limitations. Of course, we are, after all, human beings having a human experience. And with that comes certain limitations of having a physical body. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. It's all perfectly beautiful and fantastic. But even within the constraints of being a human being, there is so much more than we can experience. But we will never be truly able to experience that if we can't move past or beyond how we currently understand ourselves. And we all, on some level, understand ourselves in limited ways. That's just the fact. There's nothing wrong with that, but it is what it is. And fear is the one dominating factor that I believe everyone understands. Again, we are human beings having a human experience. It is based on survival. But as species, I believe that we are moving into awareness that is not driven as much by fear as it used to for thousands and thousands of years. And that's the liberation. Moving away from being ruled or controlled by fear, our own inner fears. Remember, what controls your mind controls you. So if your mind is dominated by fear, if your mind is controlled by fear, then fear controls you. Now here's what's fascinating. It's your mind, right? It's your mind. So if you are not in control of your mind, and most people aren't, and that's because most people are unconscious. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just the way it is. So if it's your mind, but you're not in control of it, then who is? Because whoever that is controls you. Or whatever that is controls you. Which means whatever controls you controls your life. So even though it's your mind and you should be technically in control of your mind, most of the time we're not. And that's because we're unconscious. So the year 2022 seems to be bringing a lot of clarity to that department. And a lot of this happens by us choosing to look in the mirror, to look at the reflection of what we see. And I talk about this often. If there are certain struggles that you are experiencing over and over and over again, then that means that life in 3D way is reflecting back to you what's happening on the inside. And what's happening on the inside is partly due to your mind. And looks like many people are choosing, despite their best efforts not to. So there's some resistance. Many people are choosing to look at that. And that is not very comfortable. Why is it not comfortable? Well, for one, we come to the realization or to the awareness that life is what we make it. If we are experiencing a life in a certain way, it's because that experience comes from our understanding of life in a certain way. And our understanding of life comes from our experiences. In other words, we experience life based on the past, oftentimes, more often than not. In other words, your past controls you. And that's true for most people. Now think about this for a second. If your past is in the past, why does it still control you? It controls you because you're not aware. You are not conscious of the fact that you are still holding on to some stuff from the past. And we are choosing to not only become more conscious of that, by becoming conscious, we are creating choices. And the choice is to continue to do what we have always done, except now it's conscious, or to allow ourselves to move on from that and create something different. And that becomes a choice. And that's very empowering. So we can still choose to create things based on what has been from a conscious awareness. Or we can choose to do something different. But because we can see it, because it is a choice, it's no longer happening to us. It is now us making it happen. And that's the empowerment. You can still do the same thing that you've always done, but from a space of awareness and be in a space of empowerment. Or you can do the same thing you've always done from a space of unawareness and you're being controlled by your past. That's the difference. The difference is when you are aware, you now have a choice. When you're unaware, there are no choices. It's happening to you. And that is the big difference. And a lot of humanity is realizing this. And as a result, we're beginning to wake up. So that was this first symbolism. Also, what I'm receiving is that a lot of you, or a lot of, let's say, more people are beginning to realize that there is more to life than what we can see with our eyes. And by being open to this realization, we are becoming more open to accessing information from other sources. Let's call it unconventional sources. I call it from spirit or other dimensions. So many of you listening to this, if you're not already open to this, you will start to become more open to receiving information and guidance from other sources. This means that you will be more open to be guided by your intuition, more so than your fear. And sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish the two when we're not used to following our intuition. But when we learn to follow our intuition and we get good at listening to that guidance, most of the time it becomes pretty clear. Sometimes it's not. It's often not in situations when we are very much emotionally involved or we're in a heightened emotional state. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish whether it's fear of it or intuition. But for the most part, most of you will become much more not only aware of this other guidance or inner guidance, you are going to be more likely to follow it as time goes on. Okay? Which means for many people, they will let go of the conventional way of doing things in favor of following this inner guidance or this heightened intuition. Okay? So if you are going to be one of those people, or if you already are, there is no doubt that you will begin to make choices or decisions that other people will look at you and they will scratch their heads and they will not be comfortable with what you're doing. Why would they not be comfortable with what you're doing? Well, many reasons. They want to protect you, they love you. But also because it messes with their status quo. But that's a good thing, because by following your gut or your intuition, it's like you are giving others permission to do the same, though they don't need your permission. Maybe it's more of an inspiration. You inspire others to do the same. Now think about this. If everyone followed their own guidance, if everyone followed their intuition, and your intuition is tied to your higher self only wants what is best for you. Your higher self has no agenda other than to help you grow and evolve in the best possible way for you. It's not swayed by vanity, it's not swayed by money, it's not swayed by fear, although it understands the concept of fear. It is purely interested in helping you have the best experience for the purpose of your own evolution. So imagine if everyone followed that guidance. We really wouldn't need anybody to tell us what to do. And I'm going to leave it at that. So the next bird, again, it's a bird. We have the owl. So owl obviously is the sign of wisdom. We are becoming more aware of our own innate inner wisdom, and every single human being has an innate inner wisdom. It's all within us. It always has been, it always will be. The key to that is how to access it. Now, in order to access your innate wisdom, you first have to be open to it. If you're not open to it, it ain't gonna happen. But chances are, because you're listening to this type of information, that at least on some level you're open to it. Your soul is very wise. Your soul has a lot more wisdom than your conscious understanding of yourself. Let's put it that way. And sometimes trusting this wisdom isn't always easy. And the reason for that is that because sometimes this wisdom defies what we've always done. In other words, it seems to be in contradiction to what we've always done. So if we've always done things a certain way, and now this inner wisdom is telling us to do something different, that can be scary. That can be scary. Nonetheless, we are becoming more and more aware of this inner wisdom, this innate wisdom that we all possess. What I'm seeing is that if you aren't already, many of you will begin the practice of meditating, of tuning within, in order to understand yourself more deeply, in order to truly be aware of just who you are, how you function on the unconscious level, so becoming more conscious. Again, anytime you become more conscious, you have more choices. You have the opportunity to be more in charge of your own life. You are more in control of yourself. Okay? And there will be many opportunities open to us in order to be able to access this awareness, access this wisdom. I'm seeing some people going on things like pilgrimages. I see a pilgrimage, like a spiritual pilgrimage. Obviously, that's not for everybody. For others I'm seeing plant ceremonies. Obviously, that's not for everybody. Yet for others is looking into alternative ways other than quote unquote the traditional religion. Nothing wrong with religion, by the way. But many are seeking answers from sources other than traditional religion. Now, of course, not everybody. You have to be open to that. But this is what I see happening over the next, going forward. It is basically cutting through the illusion of what we see, of what we consciously see. It's seeing beyond what is obvious. And again, in order to see beyond what's obvious, we have to be open to it. Okay? And there will be some of you, many of you, I'm sure, where you will begin to see things beyond the illusion of what is, and you will be scratching your head and you will be asking yourself questions like, am I going crazy? It's all part of it. It's all part of waking up. If you listen to any of, well-known spiritual leaders, every single one of you will tell you at some point, unless they were very aware from a very young age, and I wasn't. But those who tuned into their spiritual selves later on in life, chances are that they will tell you that they had moments of feeling that they were insane, that they were going crazy. I've talked about this before. It's all part of shedding the old. I mean, think about it this way. If you've always seen things a certain way, and that was your own little world, and all of a sudden those walls come down, and you are starting to see things beyond those walls, your entire structure begins to crumble. And that isn't easy, because it messes with your safety, with your perceived safety, it messes with your stability. But it's not that you won't have stability. You have a different version of stability. But at first it's very uncomfortable. It is not easy to shed your skin. As a matter of fact, I'm being reminded that when a snake sheds its skin, for a moment, it becomes completely blind, temporarily completely blind. Now imagine how vulnerable that is. Imagine how vulnerable that is. Okay? And apparently a snake goes through those stages. I remember when I heard that, I thought I was fascinated by it. Absolutely fascinated by it. The next one is the vulture, another bird. So we're seeing birds here. What do birds symbolize? Well, first and foremost, birds they all have wings. When we see wings, we generally depict wings with the idea of freedom. Okay? Now, who doesn't want to feel free? Who doesn't want to be free? I have not met a person who says, no, I do not want to be free. I want to be imprisoned. Although many people say they want to be free, but actually they prefer to not be free. Why? Because it's safer that way. Because they don't have to make a conscious choice. They don't have to take accountability or responsibility for their flight, for their destination. It's told to them. Okay? And that's individually and collectively. And there's nothing wrong with that. If somebody chooses to live life that way, by all means. But if the choice comes from a space of an awareness, then that might as well just be a prison. That might as well just be a prison. Now, on the other hand, when there's a conscious awareness of that and a person says, I am aware that I am choosing to be told what to do, but I still would prefer to be told what to do rather than tell myself what to do, they're making that choice. It comes from a space of empowerment. That's different. That's no longer being imprisoned. That's choosing to stay there. That's different. Very different. So the vulture is a very interesting bird because it comes to clean up whatever is left over and decomposing. So you can probably get an idea of what that means metaphorically. But the vulture often shows up to pick up the debris of what is decomposing, what is no longer serving, what is no longer serving us. And there is an energy of clarity with this. At first, it's very uncomfortable, but there's an energy of clarity with this. When a vulture is done with the corpse, all you see is bones. It's very clean. It's very precise. It's almost like a surgical procedure. So some of you may be experiencing a lot of this energy in your own life. What does that mean? Well, things in your life that are no longer serving you, things that need to be cleaned up, whether it's your own understanding of yourself, which obviously, eventually, on some level, will show itself in your physical life. So there may be some situations in your life where life will start to clean it up for you. I almost see it like a disinfectant. What's a disinfectant for? It disinfects so that there is no things growing. I mean, we all understand what the idea of disinfectant is. It's basically cleanup. And clear away of the old so that new can come in. Fresh new start, fresh new beginning. And not only is this obviously depicted globally, but individually as well. One of the other things that I was seeing is that we are all, not all, those who are choosing to be more aware. We are learning how to be more vocal with respect of speaking our truth, asking for what we want, speaking what is important to us. However, I saw an energy that was trying to shut it down, taking our voice away. But what was interesting is that whatever the energy was of taking the voice away, there were too many people voicing. So at the end of the day, the voice won. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to translate in life, but if you've had challenges speaking your truth, voicing your opinion, because you've been afraid, and that's because you've been ruled by fear, chances are quite high that over the next, 2022 going forward, you will have, not that you will have the ability, because you do have the ability, you will have a lot more confidence in standing by your truth, in speaking your truth, in voicing your truth. You are no longer going to be as afraid. Therefore, you are no longer going to be as limited by fear. And remember, who controls your mind controls your life. So if fear controls your mind, it controls your life. And the way that may translate in your life is something that you've suppressed for a very long time, or you've had the tendency to suppress your voice for a very long time. You will finally say to yourself, I choose to no longer be afraid. I choose to no longer live in fear. There's something I'm getting here. I just heard fear breeds poverty. So fear breeds lack consciousness. Okay, I'll take that. That makes sense. And by taking your voice back, by moving past the fear, you are essentially reclaiming your power. Now, from the space of empowerment, you can still choose not to say something, but choosing to not say something versus being afraid to not say something, those are two different things. Those are two different things. Okay? So it depends where you come from. I just heard, life is meant to be lived, not to be thought about. So if we're thinking about life, but we're not actioning and creating our life in order to experience what we're thinking, then chances are it's because there's something in our mind that keeps us away from that. Probably it's because we're afraid. And again, fear has its place, don't get me wrong. If someone is chasing you, I want you to be afraid, because fear is going to make you run, and it's probably going to help you survive. That's absolutely appropriate and necessary. I'm not talking about that. I think we all know the types of fears we're talking about. It's conditioning. It's the level of fear and the conditioning that is, for the most part, totally unconscious. And therefore, if it's unconscious, it can't be changed. If it's unconscious, it can't be changed. Because if it's unconscious, you can't make the choice to change it. The key word, choice. Having a choice. And I don't know about you, I've talked about this before. I would prefer to have choices versus not having choices. But that's just me. Okay? So there's a lot of freedom of expression. Now, we're already seeing this. We have been seeing this for the last little while. And a lot of it is because of a certain health situation that we are experiencing. I'm not going to mention what it is. Everybody knows. And Everybody has their own opinions of what it is or isn't. But there's a lot more expression happening. And some of that expression has been suppressed. And it has been suppressed because of fear. Why would someone want to suppress your voice? It's because there's a fear around it. Simple as that, right? So fear is very prominent on all sides. However, we collectively are standing up to our fears. And I'm not talking politically here necessarily. I'm talking individually. We are standing up to our own fears. We are facing our own fears. We are facing our fears in order to understand, what is my fear? Why do I fear it? Is it true for me? Is it true for me? Or is there a different truth? Am I conditioned to fear it? And if so, do I still want to fear whatever it is that you're fearing it? Just like the example I gave you. My fear of other people's expectations of me. I deal with this every single day to some extent still. It's part of my lifelong journey to understand it from that perspective. And how big of a hold it has on me or had on me. And every single one of you have something like that on some level. After all, we're all human beings. We all have attachments. We all limit ourselves because of our conditioning, not because there is some agenda necessarily. It's just how life works. Yes, I mean, there may be some, but again, I'm talking from an individual perspective. That is my work. Individual perspective. And consciousness collectively is made up of many, many individual consciousnesses. So if we all shift our own consciousness, if every person individually does his or her part in facing his or her fears, then ultimately, collectively, collective consciousness will change and shift, right? And the more people do that, dare I say, the quicker it will happen. There's a rise and fall of humanity. What does that mean? Humanity as we know it. There seems to be fall and then rise. So, a falling of a certain collective consciousness and a rise of another collective consciousness. And I'm seeing this going forward I'm seeing it 2022, 2023. So there's looks like a lot of interesting, let's just say, the world is an interesting place. One last thing before I end this 2022 video. When the health situation first began about 2 years ago, about 2 weeks in or a week in, when it all started to come up, I was given a message about this thing. And there were several things that were shown to me. One is that this is going to, I forget the wording that they gave me, but basically they said that this is going to create a reset in global economy. Well, clearly, that's happening. I asked for the time frame. How long is this going to last? They gave me the number 3. So I got excited and I thought, woohoo, it's going to be 3 weeks. Not. 3 months? Not. So if it's not 3 weeks and 3 months, then chances are it's 3 years. So we are approaching a 3rd year. So I have a funny suspicion that this pandemic is going to continue for the next year or so in different ways. But I don't feel, at least from what I got 2 years ago, that we're going to be free of it in 2022. It doesn't look like that. We may get some respite from it, but it feels like it's still lingering. Now, logically, looking at what's been happening, logically that makes sense to me. So I just wanted to throw it out there for you in case anyone is wondering. This is what I received 2 years ago. I don't focus on predictions. It's not my thing. But I do get it if I ask for it. The question is, do I trust it? And well, I either trust what I get or I don't. So I'm learning how to trust it. So let's see what happens. However, whatever is going to happen in 22 with regards to this, there seems to be a lot of infighting about it. Fighting about it. But we're already seeing that. And a lot more structures crumbling because of it. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, the idea of the phoenix rising from its ashes. In order for it to rise, it first has to fall. So it's brand new, creating brand new beginnings in many ways. But in order for there to be a new beginning, there has to be an ending. That's just the way it is. And this, in the long run, is creating some new solid foundations that are going to stay in place for us for a very, very long time. And this thing is creating chaos in order to help create new structures. And we are in transitions right now. We are experiencing the transition period of it. And generally, when there is a transition, there is usually a bit of chaos. So there seems to be some chaotic energies around this situation in 2022. And a little bit of 2023. So it looks like it might be another year. Some things looks like might be loosening up. But there seems to be a need for control, which I don't really want to get into, because now it's getting into a political side that I have no interest in. There are other people who can do that. So that's what I have for you for 2022, or maybe end of 2023. Remember, who or what controls your mind controls you. So it is important that you become aware of what that is, that you become conscious of what that is. Because when you are aware and conscious, you can make a different choice. And if you choose to do the same thing, but you do it from a space of empowerment, that's different. That's you in your power saying, no, I choose to do this or that. But it's from a space of empowerment. And of course, if you would like me and my team to help you in your own journey, to help you see the truth of what is underneath your conscious awareness, I would be more than honored to do that. And that information is down below. Thank you all so much. This was a little bit different, more of a collective message. I look forward to seeing you in 2022. Happy New Year. Thank you all for your support. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.